Hello, everybody. That's me clapping you for inviting me here. First of all, I'm sure you think I'm a lot less fat looking in real life, right? Than TV. I just want to tell you my story and see what you think afterwards, and maybe some of you will have questions for me, and I'd be happy to answer them. So here's a bit of my background. Born above the Ballygamartin Road. Both my mum and dad didn't have much money. In fact, I'm so proud of what my mother and father did for me because they worked around the clock. I remember my father at the end of the week having so little money that sometimes we couldn't go and do things as a family. And so I was always kind of very aware that I was from one of those backgrounds in Northern Ireland where certainly money wasn't going to give me an advantage, all right, when I was growing up. I loved school, and I loved the opportunity that a good school, and Mrs. Quinn has been telling me about this school, and it's a fantastic school, and what you're achieving so far, you should all be very, very proud of. And once you have a good school, then what I would advise you to do, because what I did, is I grabbed it. And so what can you get out of that? The friends that you're making now, incredible. And like I'm out of school over 20 odd years now, what am I? I'm 44 now. I'm out of school a long, long time, and we still meet up and we still have a laugh together, and that's very important. So grab that and use that and keep your friendships. So I got to the stage where I was doing my exams and I was working really, really hard. I remember in primary school, thinking I was working very hard, and then it was my 11 plus in the day. It was the transfer test, the big school, and I failed that test. I didn't pass that test. So that was a kind of another knockback to me. It was just an obstacle, one of the first obstacles in my life. That's the one I remember. And then I was a goalkeeper playing football for a very, very good team called Bloomfield Youth. And I was kind of the fat kid that I couldn't reach up and hit the crossbar. And I remember now, so this is coming back to me, I remember reaching up and trying to jump, and all the other kids could jump and could touch the crossbar, and I couldn't. And that inability for me to touch that crossbar has stayed with me 30 years later. Because I knew that whatever I wanted to achieve in life, I would have to fight for it, that it wasn't going to come naturally to me. So I don't think I have any natural ability at anything I do in life. I don't think that I'm particularly good or better than other people at anything I do in life, but I'll tell you what I do think. I have a determination that's probably more than thousands of people put together. So see, when there's a brick wall put in front of me, there's just something in me that says, I'm going to knock that wall down. So there's nothing in me that thinks I'm better than anybody else, but there's something in me says, all right, I've failed my test. I'm too fat for this. I'm this, I'm that. Right, I'm going to still succeed. So then I had a dream, and this was when I was about 18, 19, not a physical dream, just this thing in me. I always wanted to work for the BBC. That's what I wanted to do. And I used to walk past the big building in Ormeau Avenue. It's a massive big building. I used to look at it. If only I could work in there. And I listened to all the fantastic presenters on the radio, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I started writing letters to the BBC. And the vast majority of them, they wrote back and said, no. It's just not the right time, or we don't have any vacancies, or whatever. And so then I applied for a traffic and travel job. A traffic and travel job is essentially where you report on the traffic. And I remember going for that interview in the BBC, and the BBC telling me that I didn't have a voice for radio, which is interesting, because I'm now on their station 9 shows a week. And so that was another knockback. And that was another, my goodness, I don't have a voice for radio in the Beeb. Right, okay. That's not good. And then I continued and continued with these letters and standing outside the BBC, wanting to be in there. And a very senior producer, and this is many years ago, we're going back over a decade, and a very senior producer brought me into the BBC and showed me this email that someone had sent, that a senior person at the BBC had sent, which said, look, Stephen Nolan is essentially a bit of a stalker. Don't speak to him. He just doesn't have the ability. And I walked out of the BBC that day crying. So I was devastated because that was my dream over until I got home. And I thought to myself, do they think I'm not good enough? Are they actually building the highest brick wall in front of me ever? Well, I'll show them. So what I did was, there was a community radio station called BCR. None of these you will know about because you're all too young and I'm too old now. But BCR became City Beat Radio, and City Beat Radio recently became Q Radio. You've probably heard of Q Radio. And I literally, and I'm telling you these stories just to show you the extent of the determination from someone who's no better than any of you, who's no better educated than any of you, but I've got more determination than some of you. So the BBC had rejected me. So I went to this community radio station and I approached the manager there. And the manager was a lovely guy called Mike Gaston, but he said, look, we've no vacancies. So every day, and I mean every day, at 5 o'clock, when he walked out of that community radio station, I was standing there saying, are you sure there's nothing? Are you sure? And even if it was pouring rain, I stood there. It probably was becoming weird, okay? And about 4 months later, he allowed me to come in and answer the phones. And once I got inside that organisation, I tried everything I could to impress that organisation. What could I do? So I was answering the phones, but I was also offering to make the tea. I was also offering, you needed something recorded? I went and I did it. And I brought it back to them, and they hadn't even asked. So I might have overheard this. I went out and I did it, and I brought it back to them. And so eventually they gave me a little show on BCR, this community radio station. And then I thought, well, what about this objective that I have to prove the BBC wrong? And so I found the biggest awards that there were in radio. They were in the UK. They were called the Sony Awards. And these were the awards that the likes of Jonathan Ross, Terry Wogan at the time, all those big Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 5 presenters were winning. And what I did was I targeted winning one of those awards in order to say to the BBC, you don't want me? Because I knew the BBC went to those awards. And it took me a couple of years, but I ended up in London, this wee Belfast kid in London, and I won 3 of them on the first year, 3 gold awards. And what I would do is I would come up onto the stage and I would say to the BBC, because they would be there, and I would say, listen, I welcome my colleagues from the BBC, commiserations in not winning tonight, and I had the trophy in my hand. So 3 years later, this fantastic, incredible organisation that is the BBC allowed me in the door. And what I have been trying to do after I got in the door ever since was I have been trying to say to them, first of all, thank you for letting me be part of it, but here's what I can do. And I've been working so hard, all right? And that drive to try to achieve something gets you so far, all right? It really does. So you see, if there's any of you in this room today and you're kind of thinking to yourself, yeah, I've got a dream or I've got an ambition, I promise you that there's very few people will be so determined that they will stand in the rain like I did for 4 months in order to get into that first job. So if you're prepared to do something like that, if you're prepared to be the most determined person, here's the score. Very few other people are that determined, so you'll make it. I promise you will. That's the secret. So don't think of yourselves as any better than anybody else. Don't think of yourselves as at any disadvantage because you don't have money. But do think to yourselves that you could be incredibly successful because you've got the determination. There might be one of you in the room. There might not be more than that. There might be 10 of you in the room, but who's going to actually do it? Now, I mentioned the word success there. What is success in life? I'll tell you now, success isn't a lot of money, because I've got a lot of money and I don't consider myself successful. All right? Success in life is achieving what you want to do. Success in life is contentment and you kind of knowing that you are doing what you want to do in life. So don't get wrapped up in that either. I know money and cars and big houses and all of that is what you kind of aspire to when you're your age. But I've got that. And what I actually did recently, I bought myself a nice car, but I came down from an expensive car to a less expensive, very nice car. All right? Just know that contentment is the most important thing. And you're at the age now where you can achieve that. The prevailing message that I want to get through to you all today is have a sense of ambition, but a sense of opportunity in your lives, that you've got time. You've got the advantage of time if it clicks into your mind now that you can do. So if you think about it, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? You've got the time to do it if you work out a strategy in your head and you're prepared to be more determined than anyone else. Let me tell you about a couple of the other things, because I don't want to ramble on today. And what I would love to do today is hear from you. You'll be asking me questions and we talk to each other. I'll tell you the other thing that I hate in Northern Ireland. I detest it. And it's class. And it's snobbery, okay? And it's people from kind of more sophisticated backgrounds thinking that they're better than people who are from working class estates or who don't have a lot of money behind them, all right? What you will find, and what I've found in life, is people from working class backgrounds, people from backgrounds where they've had to fight to earn their money, they're as good as anybody else in Northern Ireland and can work as good and can perform as good and can achieve as much. So I know that some of you might not be from the most affluent backgrounds in Northern Ireland. Neither am I, right? And I'm very proud of my roots. I'm very proud of the education I got, the school I got. I'm very proud of the friends I have. And all I can see around me is opportunity. One last thing, and then I'll listen from you. And this is quite important as well, I think. So I'm doing quite well in the BBC, all right? I'm presenting 9 radio shows a week. I'm presenting something like 30, 40 odd television shows a year. Do I look like a TV presenter? Okay. I'm fat. I'm quite disheveled. It's a miracle that there's not a stain down my shirt. Okay. What am I trying to say to you? Don't get sucked into this thing of what's the conventional thing, what's the robotic, that society is saying you have to look like or you have to sound like. Be yourself, because that's such an important message. Because you see, if you're yourself and you have confidence in who you are, then anybody who judges you, you just kind of look at them. So again, I've had people, how could he be on telly at 20 stone? Well, I'm on telly at 20 stone, and there's some of the most watched programs in Northern Ireland. In other words, people accept you for who you are, so accept yourself for who you are. Last thing from me, and then we can ask each other questions, hopefully. There's a really important project for me over the next 18 months. I want to dedicate myself to it. And the project that I'm currently presenting is only one arm of that. This is another that I'm not driving. Other people in the BBC are, and they're doing a fantastic job. Look at this. And that is that the BBC has got a huge commitment, all right? A meaningful, huge, they really mean it, that we want to invest in you. And we want you to become a bigger voice in Northern Ireland society. So that does mean getting involved in politics. That does mean that if something's happening in your community, then interact with the BBC and put us under pressure to reflect what you want to be heard. Because I'm listening. I don't know if any of you have seen the Top Table show where I'm now putting young people and at the very top table in a massive studio to take the politicians on. But there are other projects. There's this. There are many other projects in the BBC where we are actively saying to you now, become part of the BBC in a bigger way and let your voice be heard. And you see, if anybody says to you, you're not old enough, you're not mature enough, you don't have enough life experience, tell them to get stuffed, all right? Because you have a lot more to add to this society than some of the people who are slightly older who have been saying the same things for many years. So you've got a voice. We need to give you a platform. And I'm telling you, standing here today, that that's what I want to do, so use it. Who's got the first question?